Today we're going to talk about some of the features of Acumatica's manufacturing modules. And we're actually going to start on the sales order screen to show you the links between sales orders and manufacturing orders. And from there, we'll get into bills of material and material requirements planning and those sorts of things that are all pertinent to manufacturing. So I had created a manufacturing order previously just to give you an idea of what this might look like. I've chosen the customer and selected an inventory item whose replenishment method is manufacturing. So this is something that we wouldn't purchase, but we would need to manufacture. It can be make to order, or it could be something that you keep in stock and make batch production orders for them. So this particular example is going to be something that we'll make to order and is indicated that it's make to order with this mark for production checkbox. And by doing this, Acumatica then allows you to, from the sales order, create a production order. And by doing that, it will link the production order to the sales order throughout its manufacturing life cycle. So I selected the Keurig is what we're going to be manufacturing today. It's defaulted to a quantity of 1 because that's what's on the sales order. And I'm going to go ahead and create a production order directly from the sales order. And now you can see that it's linked the new production number to the sales order. You can also create production orders outside of the sales order by going through the production orders module, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But for now, I'm going to continue on through the sales order and click on the production number. It opens up a pop-up and it pops me up in the production order maintenance screen where there's a lot of information. So the production number, it's telling me what inventory ID I'm going to be manufacturing, what warehouse that this will be moved into when this order is completed, and this is editable, so it's defaulted based on what's been set up for this finished good, but you can change it if necessary, and the default location that has been set up for this item. There's a general tab which gives you information on the quantity that you'll be producing for this particular item, as well as scheduling information. So start and end dates. These happen to be the same date in this example because this item has not been configured with a lead time. If there had been a lead time, then the start and end dates would be different and would be backed off based on what your constraint date is. So if your constraint date or the date that you want to complete this item on is in the future and there is a lead time, then your start date would be something different, backed off by the amount of the lead time. So we're going to hop over to the references tab, and this first section gives you all of the information about the sales order that was used to create this inventory or this manufacturing order. It will stay, this will be linked together for the life cycle of this production order. It's also telling you what work in process accounts are being used, which can also be changed if necessary on this specific order. And some of the key information here on the source section is that this has been generated from an existing bill of material, and the date that this production order was created. And probably the most important is which bill of material ID and revision that this was created from. So one of the features of Acumatica is that you can create production orders for different revisions of an item. And we'll take a deeper dive into the bill of material and the revisions in just a little bit. So the event history tab is a way to track everything that has taken place on this particular production order. So right now, all I've done is created it, and it's been created in a planned state. So in a planned state, I can make changes to the production order. I can add and remove inventory items if necessary to the production order. And then as each new action takes place, it'll be added to this list. So anytime I issue material to the production order or move it through its various work centers, those will be documented here on this tab with the date and time and who actually created it. We'll hop over to the totals tab, and on the totals tab, you've got 3 columns here. One is the planned labor and material dollars for this particular production order. And I'll show you where those numbers are coming from. They're based on the bill of material. And that information is stored and then defaulted in on each production order that's created. The next column over is actuals. So as you collect labor hours and you collect machine and material dollars throughout the course of the production order, it will track those as well, and then calculate in the third column the variance between what you planned and your actual dollars for this particular production order to help you plan in the future, maybe make changes to your material costs if necessary, or sales costs based on what you're seeing in variances. So those are the basics. This gives you, the high level information about the specific production order. And from here, I talked about just a minute ago, the fact that you can edit information on an individual production order. So on the production order details screen, it pulls in the work centers and the material that's been defined for this finished good item. And this is based on the bill of material. So this bill of material has been assigned to work centers. So this middle section defines essentially the routing that this finished good would go through in its assembly process. So the first work center here is assembly, and the second work center is inspection. And if you notice down below, when I jumped between the 2 work centers, there's material that was displayed in the assembly work center, and then nothing was displayed in inspection. And what that represents is this material is what gets consumed at the assembly workstation. And then when it gets moved to the inspection operation, there's no additional material required. This is strictly manual. It's labor without material at that particular work center. And as I mentioned before, an existing production order, add or remove operations as necessary, or add and remove additional material. Say you had to scrap some material during an operation and you needed to add additional quantities to this particular production order, you could do that through this production order details screen. So this is a high-level overview of the production order and information itself. And I want to sort of back up, I guess, and talk about the bill of material that was used to generate all this information. So if I hop out of that screen and hop into the bill of materials modules, here you will find information on the profiles for your bills of material, your work centers. You can define overhead, tooling, machining, all of that type of information can be set up here in the bill of materials menu. So I'm going to jump into the bill of materials screen. I'm going to take a look at the Keurig that we were just looking at. And that particular bill of material. And this looks very similar to what we just saw in the production order, because this is what the production order is generated from. So within the bill of material, it's assigned a bill of material ID. You can control the revision. So I think in that production order, you saw that it was generated with an A revision for this Keurig. You can also have other active revisions for each of the finished goods or the assemblies that you're creating bills of material for. And that allows you might be asking, why would you want to do that? Well, you may have customers who have been, long-term customers and want to reorder items that were built to a specific revision, that historically they've used that same product, and maybe your company has made changes to that over the years, but they want to continue to order the same revision that they had in the past. And this allows you to create production orders based on older revisions that exist. So going back to what we saw in the production order, it has the same middle section that defines the various work centers. You can click on any of the links that are here, and we can open up that work center screen and take a look at what the setup for a work center looks like. So this one is assembly, and you'll notice this outside process checkbox. So Acumatica supports outside processing. So if your routing involves something that is it requires an outside process like painting or welding or something like that, you can set up an actual work center to accommodate the sending out of that material. The standard cost, you can use the standard cost of the work center either by crew size or by machine cost, depending on the type of operation that is. And you can set scrap action. So if during the process of manufacturing, you have scrap at a particular operation, you can default to not taking any action on that, or you can set it up to automatically write that off to a scrap account, or even quarantine it if you use like non-conformance boards and do reviews of material that's been scrapped or damaged during process. So you can set up quarantining action as well within particular work centers. So hopping down to some of these tabs, for each work center, you can define the number of shifts that are involved in that particular work center and define if there's a shift differential. You can assign overhead, machines for each of these work centers, and then all of this will default into the bill of material when the bill of material is created. You can also use this screen to look at what other assemblies use this particular work center in their processes as well. And you can also assign substitute work centers. So if you have a machine that's down and you need to run it through a separate work center for a short period of time, you can assign substitute work centers. So this is where you would set up all of your various work centers and routings. And I'm going to hop back over to the bill of material and show you that within each bill of material, you can then document whether for that operation there's setup time and what the runtime would be. So for a person who is creating or building that assembly. So in this example, in this work center, 20 units could be assembled in an hour. And there is no machine time, but if there were machine time, or this was a work center that was strictly, the capacity was based just on what the machine could produce, you could use machine units instead. So maybe the machine produces 1,000 units per hour. So Acumatica gives you both options for a capacity basis. And then queue time can also be documented. So if after a particular operation, you have material that sits and waits for its next operation, you can build in queue time, and all of this time is then used to define the lead time for this item. Acumatica supports the backflush of labor, so you can either have operators manually track their hours that they're working on a particular manufacturing order, or you can have Acumatica backflush labor based on what you've defined in your runtime and or machine time for that particular work center. So Acumatica supports both. And we talked a little bit about the material then that gets consumed at each of the works operation steps or the routing steps. And Acumatica supports multi-level bills of material. So for example, this Keurig takes a reservoir inlet and a printed circuit board and some other pieces of material. This printed circuit board happens to be another manufactured item. So there is a bill of material for this item. And I've just clicked on that printed circuit board. It's going to pop me up the stock item. It's going to pop me up the stock item if I allow it to pop me up the stock item. And we can look on the record for this printed circuit board to see that this is another manufactured item that would also have a bill of material assigned to it and could also be produced in your manufacturing shop. So Acumatica does support multi-level bills of material in its manufacturing modules. So down below in this materials tab is where you would define how many of each of the items is required at that step. It will default in unit costs based on what you've set up on that actual item. And then all of this is used to create the production order when you create the production order. You can, for each operation, We'll walk through some of these other tabs. You can assign steps. So if you want to provide your operators with instructions on how to build this, you can include operating steps at that work center. If there's tooling that's required, you can add that. And overhead and outside processes can also either be added directly here in the bill of material, or they'll default in from what you created in that actual work center. So this is an example of bills of material within Acumatica, and then these bills of material are used in the creation of the production orders. And just to give you a little insight into the multi-level bills of material, one of the features in Acumatica is this visual bill of material. So if I look at this screen, if I hop in here, I'm going to pull up the Keurig that we've been looking at during this process. And over here on the left side, you can see it's showing you a tree. So this Keurig, we saw in that previous bill of material that there were two operations. One was assembly, one was inspection. And if we expand the assembly operation, it's showing the different materials that are required at that operation. And if I expand the printed circuit board, we can also see that it has two operations as well. So this gives you essentially an indented bill of material showing you items that need to be manufactured or ones that are just purchased items, but gives you a high level picture of what goes into this actual finished good item. So that's a high level look at bills of material. So we've talked up to this point, we've talked about the fact that we could take a sales order and create a production order from that sales order. And that production order is based on a bill of material that's been defined for the item that needs to be produced, and that the production order can be modified on the fly if material needs to be added or removed during the process of making that production order. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on for manufacturing is material requirements planning, or MRP, as it's often referred to. And Acumatica has a full-blown MRP process and system. It also supports forecasting and master production schedules. But today we're just going to take a look at MRP and what that looks like in Acumatica. And within MRP and Acumatica, this is your one-stop shop for all of your replenishment items. So not just items that fall into or need to be purchased or manufactured for production orders, but if you have safety stock or min-maxes set on your replenishment for material, those will show up here as well as things that might need to be ordered or manufactured directly off of a sales order. So all of your material planning can be handled in this one screen. And so to take a look at this and break down what this is showing us, so you'll have your inventory ID with its description and its replenishment source. So some of these items are purchase replenishment sources, some of them are manufacturing. If you look up at the top, it also supports transfer. And what this means is that if you have warehouses that you transfer material between to supply demand for customers or demand for other manufacturing orders, this MRP screen will also tell you when you might need to transfer material between warehouses to support that demand. It's telling you what warehouse requires this particular material and the quantity. It's also giving you information on the date that this material is promised or is needed for its next operation. So if this, we looked at the printed circuit board and it's an assembly that's used in the Keurig. So if the Keurig needed to begin its production on last year, April 20th, then we would need to start producing the printed circuit board before that date. And it would tell you when you would need to start producing that printed circuit board. So that's what the action date column is. So if we take a look at this first item, this is a pump and it is a purchased item. I'm going to scroll over just a little bit. We need 65 of them on March 31st. And due to lead time, we need to order these on March 24th. And the type column is tell you where the demand is coming from. So this demand is coming from another production order. So there is a production order that exists that needs this material. You need to order it on March 24th in order to have it on hand on the 31st to start your production order. If there's a preferred vendor defined for this item, it will show you who the preferred vendor is. And then we get into where that demand is coming from. So this is the manufacturing order that requires that particular piece. Or if we look down the list just a little bit, we see an item that's coming from a sales order. So this sterilized scalpel is needed for a sales order, directly for a sales order. And this is the sales order that requires it. So in order to fulfill the items that are on this list, you can either, go down the list and select them and click purchase for the purchased items, or if it's a manufactured item, you would click manufacture, and Acumatica will generate the purchase order or the manufacturing order for the selections that you've created. If the list is big and you just want to take a look at, things that I want to purchase from Pure Water, say, and so I can filter this list for just items that I need to order from Pure Water, and I can select those and click purchase, and it's showing me another screen that just defines all of those items. I'm going to click create. And it's telling me that it has created a purchase order 1199 for those items. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to hop over to the purchase order screen. And here is the purchase order that was just generated for those parts associated with those manufacturing orders. It comes in on a hold state, and now it's ready for your purchasing process and receipt process. So that's a high-level view of the material requirements planning. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them. But just to recap what we walked through, Acumatica, again, you can create manufacturing orders from your sales orders. You can create them. We didn't talk about this. I touched on it. You can create manufacturing orders from scratch just by going into the production order maintenance screen and creating a new production order. You can modify your production order on the fly. So what gets pulled in here, if I just go back to our good old Keurig. So it's created this production order based on an existing bill of material, and I can change items on this particular production order before or during its manufacturing process. We talked about the events that take place and how they get tracked. We talked about material, labor, and sheet totals and how that gets tracked in Acumatica, and variances get calculated. And we've talked about MRP and material requirements planning and how that can be used as a source for replenishment of all material in Acumatica, not just manufacturing parts or parts that are used in production orders. So that's a high-level overview. Thanks for your time today, and have a great rest of your day.